Hello, everyone. This is Kati Gostaspi, and welcome to another episode of the Kati G podcast. Specifically, this sub-series is all about women lawyers making a difference. The whole point of my podcast, the mission, is that it is for us to realize how great we are, not just as lawyers, but as human beings, and that we can even be greater. And most importantly, how can you, as the listener, as the woman lawyer, really bring this greatness to the world through your brand? And why I do this podcast is for two main reasons. One, I care deeply about humanity and the humanity in all of us as women lawyers. And I really want us all to see how great we can really be, to be happier and to own our roles and our identities. And two, look, I am just like you. I struggle with my own feelings of being less than, imposter syndrome, juggling everything. I'm just probably a couple of years advanced because I've been doing this for a long time. So some days are good, some days are ugly, and we learn from one another. So this time, my podcast is all about Daphne Forbes. Daphne is Assistant General Counsel of Microsoft Regulated Industries. Welcome, Daphne. So happy to have you.
Katty, thank you so much for having me. Listen, I love everything that you're doing to amplify women. So thank you for the opportunity to spend some time with you today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for making time. I can just imagine what's on your plate. You know, everyone says they're busy. I once read a book called Busy by Tony Crabb, Crabbe. Go get it for yourself, listeners. And he said, stop telling people you're busy. So everyone's busy, everyone's doing their things, but it's about what do we make time for? So thanks for making time for us. Really appreciate you
Absolutely.
committing to it. So Daphne, start off for our audience and just tell us your story. Tell us whatever we want and we should know about you, and which you want us to know about you.
Yeah, so I'm pretty simple. I'm an open book, right? I dig it when I can share, some lessons learned so that, one of my colleagues, especially women, don't inadvertently step in it, right? So anything that I can do to share my experience. I have 20 plus years in corporate America, and boy, do I have some experiences, some lessons learned, some values that I embrace. I'm all about sharing that so that again we can spare some drama for some of our colleagues out there.
I love it. Lack of drama. That's my go-to. You know, I'm a Gemini. I grew up with a lot of drama, and my goal these days is to be drama free, which my husband, by the way, really appreciates. So tell us, how did you become a lawyer? How did you decide to go down this route? And how'd you end up at Microsoft?
Yeah, so the lawyer journey started for me ever since I was in the fourth grade. I have the absolute privilege of growing up in a family where my grandfather was a judge. So I spent many of my summers in his courtroom trying to figure out what was going on, right? And I always knew, Kathy, as a woman of color who wanted to be a lawyer, that my voice and my experiences would matter. Um,
Mm.
and again, trying to always index on the importance of making a difference and helping folks. The legal path seemed to be the right path for me. I kind of happened upon Microsoft, right? I always thought I was going to be a civil rights attorney, or even as a human resources professional and employment attorney. But somehow I got into doing corporate deals, right? When I started off as a lawyer at Lockheed Martin. And once you kind of get stuck in a discipline, if you will, that's kind of how your career trajects. And so I happened upon technology just through networking with other folks. I met some attorneys at Microsoft. They happened to have, you know, a position for lawyers, always looking for diverse attorneys. I happen to have the experience, and there I am. The person with the experience happened to be diverse. The opportunity was there, and I've been at Microsoft for about 14 and a half years.
I love the way you put that because it's so true. In the diversity space. So, as I said earlier to you, I'm chair of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging at the ABA Law Practice Division. And it's just always awful to be the token, let's put her on there because she's woman or she's diverse or whatever. You said, because I had the know how and I happen to be diverse. And
Yeah.
I think until we all really understand that that's the mindset that succeeds, there will be no change.
Yeah,
truly.
and Caddy, just to index on that, especially now while it's trending and trendy to look for diverse candidates, right? Because all of a sudden everybody realizes that Black lives really do matter. It's important for us as people of color to know that we bring it every day. We have the competencies, we are capable, we are enough, right, to get those positions and to excel and to succeed at them. Whether people are just recognizing it now, let's just hope that it's a sustainable push that diverse lawyers and diverse people are getting the recognition they deserve.
I just sometimes step back. You're so eloquent, and it's such a beautiful thing you just said. But I step back sometimes and I think, oh my God, I can't believe we're having these conversations. That these things need to be said based on something that's so. I mean, it's just about the humanity of us and our abilities rather than anything that's a visual marker of who we are. At the ABA, when I became chair this year, I said, I'm only going to do something that's really going to shift people's perspectives. I just don't want to, I do a lot of bias CLEs and whatnot. And I'm like, I just don't want to be a talking head, right? And I don't want the bar to be a talking head. So we did a book club on Isabel Wilkerson's book Cast, and
Yeah.
just reading the book Cast for myself, it was the most sweaty conversation I've had with myself. And it was so uncomfortable, but it always brought me back to what you're saying, that I cannot believe we're still having these conversations.
Yeah.
So I
There's a
can't ignore
number.
it.
There's a number of conversations, just to piggyback off of what you said, that I can't believe the conversations that I have almost on a daily basis, especially since the audience is mostly, I think, women for your podcast, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
What can we do to support other women? That conversation is mind boggling to me, that we would actually have to give advice on how we can support each other.
Such a fantastic thing to say. And finish that sentence. Why? Why is that so mind boggling?
It's mind boggling because I would, maybe something's weird about me, Caddy. I embrace that I'm different, but it is just a no brainer, right? That we would index on supporting other women, index on supporting our race, right? That's why the diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging is so important. And, Madeline Albright, she has this famous quote that I love to repeat, where she said, "There's a special place in hell for women who don't support other women." It just seems so natural that we would do that. And women as
Right.
nurturers, what is the problem with supporting each other?
Well, and you just said so much we could talk about, and we're limited on time, but I just like to talk because I just think it goes where it's supposed to go. So, Judy Perry Martinez, who was chair of the American Bar Association 2 years ago, said at an event, and I've been quoting her since, women don't pull the ladder up when you get to the top. And
Mm,
I really believe we do it. And I
um,
just had an incidence of this 2 years ago for myself, where I was defending another woman and then it came back down on me, and all the other women just got real quiet. And I said to them, what is wrong with you? Why are you not speaking up? And they were worried about losing business. But that aside, I think it's because we fear the competitive aspect of it and being outcasts. And as long as we do that, the woman who I was defending came and said, I couldn't speak up for myself. And I'm sorry that you had to speak up for me. And it came back on you. I said, I would do this regardless,
wow.
because it's not about competition. It's about, men are wired more for competitiveness. And this is not my research. My research is around stress and self confidence. This is Alison Armstrong's research for listeners. So go out and read all about Alison Armstrong's research in this area. There was one deer back in the day, and men had to hunt this one deer to feed their families. So they had to be competitive.
Okay.
But at the same time, as women, we were out, according to Allison, in the meadow gathering the berries together with the babies on our back. So we were complementary, and we had diffused awareness. We could see, that's her term, we could see out into the meadow. So that's why when my husband goes to the fridge and goes, where's the pickles? I'm like, third row in the back on the left behind the ketchup. And that's just how we operate. So what happened along the way where we think we have to lose our identity? And when
Yeah.
that happens, we become disconnected from ourselves and from our community.
I it's interesting that you said that, because I was thinking about some of the values that I have embraced along my 20-year career. and there are many. But if I had to index on like the top two or three, that whole having her back versus stabbing her in it, the competition versus the collaboration is one thing that I would want every woman who's listening to this podcast to embrace, right? I think, keep me honest, Kathy, that there is another pandemic that is wreaking havoc on our gender. Forget about COVID-19. There's this pandemic, there's a virus. It's the competition 365 virus that's wreaking havoc on our gender. But the good news is that there is a vaccination that women can inject within ourselves right now, and that is the collaboration 24/7 vaccine to eradicate, the nastiness that sometimes come when we start to compete. And if we could just find ways to support one another, I think that is one of the biggest solutions to improving the gap that is diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging within our own gender. Right. I know that sounds
Absolutely.
kind of corny, but it feels like the time is right because we're in COVID. I want us to focus on eradicating this particular virus that is wreaking havoc on our gender, because what I know is when women get together, we are amazing, we're phenomenal, we make things happen, and we all win.
Oh, so well said. I love it. Competition 365. That's what you called it, right? So,
Competition 365. Yep, that's the virus.
I have you here today because August 26th is Women's Equality Day here in the US, but I turned all of August into Equality Month. And the premise really is all about us owning our own value and feeling equal so that we can actually go out there and then spread that brand as I teach it,
Mm,
right? And to your point, I think this is the plague that you see these as the symptoms. When I don't know who I am and I'm not comfortable with my identity and my brand,
mm,
then I say you're not valuing me, Mister So and So. But really, I'm not valuing me, so I can't embrace another woman. Certainly,
mm,
law firms and corporations come to me and go. About 4 years ago, it started. They would come and go, can you put together a mentorship program for us? Because the women lawyers are leaving. And I would say, oh, no, I'm not doing that for you. I don't want your money. And they were all surprised. But here's why, to your point, you take a woman who is saddled with so much responsibility and stress and self-confidence issues, and you say, now you got to mentor somebody, and you think you're helping her, you're just giving her more responsibility that she doesn't have the opportunity and the bandwidth to respond with, much less doesn't know her brand. And then you're saying, do this. And so I said, I'm not going to do that. I will give you a support circle so that people can figure out what their brand is. And once they do, then I will give you that mentorship packet for free because you don't need me for that. When I know my brand and I know who I am, I'm confident. I want to help another woman
yep.
and I want to help the organization succeed. And then mentorship is just natural as a result of that,
Yep.
right? So I think to what you're saying, that is a pandemic problem. It's a plague because without knowing who I am, there's no way I can see the value in anybody else,
Yeah.
right?
And
And so that's why I have you here. What are the other lessons you have to teach us around us owning our own value and our own equality? That was a
yeah.
good one.
Yeah. So let me think. Number another one, I think, and this is just table stakes, is that you have to be intentional about planning your career, its trajectory, and that's easier said than done, Kathy. I mean, there's prongs to
Yeah.
that. Prong one, when we start to be intentional about planning our careers and its trajectory, we always have to increase the intensity upon which we continue to improve our core competencies, right? We have to bring
Absolutely.
it, right? We have to always operate in excellence. Look, and as women, I know how capable we are. I know that we are so worthy. I think that we are learn it alls versus know it alls, and that
I
we
love it.
are forever students, because at the base, no matter if you're in corporate America or you're doing your own thing, you have to be at the top of your game. So that's prong one. The other thing is that I would offer to wear your confidence to work every day. And if you are struggling, which a lot of women do, in wearing her confidence to work, then the good news is that you have someone like Kathy, who is an executive coach who can help you figure out how to get your confidence. But for those of you who have the confidence, you got to always continue to improve your confidence. Know that you got to bring it each and every day, and you are worthy. One of my most favorite mentors said to me one day when I was having some challenges with my own confidence, she said, Daphne, you had it when you walked into the room. Otherwise, they wouldn't have hired you. So I want to share that same sentiment with your audience. You have it already each and every time you walk into the room. Now it's up to you to show up with your best self, to make sure that you're always adding luster to your brand, to your point, Kathy, and not doing things to dull your brand. You have it when you walked into the room.
How do you make sure you remember that, Daphne? Teach us.
Oh, you know what? It's interesting for me. It has a lot to do with how I was raised, right? My parents, my grandparents always told me that when you walk into a room, you're representing not just yourself, but you're
Mm.
representing your ancestors, your family, right? So I always, and because I am an optimist, I always want to show up in my best self because I know that people are watching and people are probably unfortunately and not fairly judging me for how I show up. And it matters to me how I show up.
So, what do you say to those listeners that are saying, oh, sure, well, she was raised that way and she's an optimist. I didn't have that kind of background and I didn't have that kind of support. And that's turned me into a pessimist.
Yeah.
And I didn't have those opportunities. What do you say to them?
Yeah. I say to them, stop it. Right. I say to them that you have to figure out a way to recognize your value, that your brand and what you bring to the table has value and you matter, right? Whether or not you come from a background of privilege, but if you have goals and aspirations to do X or to get to X, then you have to figure out a way to show up in ways that always leave people in awe. And sometimes when you can't, you have people in your circle. Hopefully, I personally have a personal board of directors, and that is a mix of people who are mentors, sponsors. Some of my mentees mentor me, and it's executive coaches like Kathy who can help you navigate through those waters. Again, you gotta find your confidence. You gotta find your why, and you gotta understand that you have value no matter your background. And guess what? All women are super women. We're superheroes, but every now and then, even Wonder Woman needs a little help sometimes. So rely
Amen.
on those people
Amen.
in your circle to help you get from A to B.
And you know what I think I've found, to summarize what you're saying so eloquently, is that we often just don't make time for ourselves because we
Mm,
don't find our own inherent value. So the lingo becomes, I'm busy doing the substantive work plus motherhood plus now Zoom school and now the hybrid model.
true.
And I don't have the time. And I always say, you make the time for what you prioritize.
Yes.
You find it, you create it. The whole oxygen mask example, so cliche, but as Marianne Williamson says, something is cliche because it's said often, because it's true and
Right.
it's so apt, right? So, I have my own coach because I love having someone who has my back. And I spend an ungodly amount of money on that process because this is not foreshadowing what I charge, but I'm just saying because I am worth it, right? I was born worth it, which is
That's
what you're
it.
saying. You already have it before you walk into the room. Now, I have many days, and I'm sure you do too. I shouldn't speak for you, Daphne, where I'm like, today I don't think I have it and I'm worth it, but I'm just going to pretend and I'm going to suck it up
Yeah.
because I'm human and I have a lot of grace and forgiveness for myself. And For those listeners who have never heard, and maybe Daphne, you've probably heard of this, Ho'opono Ono. It's a Hawaiian prayer of forgiveness.
Mm,
And it is the most beautiful process. And I will drop it in the show notes. It's called Ho'opono Ono. But if you just Google Hawaiian forgiveness process, it allows us to forgive ourselves for those bad days
yeah,
and to keep moving through with grace, because it's not always natural for us to be able to see that. But I love my coach. And like you said, because that allows me to prioritize myself. And
yeah,
I'm on the calendar, and whether I like it or not, I'm paying for it. So I better show up. And if I don't, then somebody's going to be like, I care about you. You're important. You're accountable to me. And that's a good thing.
yeah,
And I love someone who watches my mindset and has my back. And I think when we recognize that, then we're unstoppable. But to your point, maybe that's what you're really saying underneath all that. Am I worth it? What would I be like if I was unstoppable? I think about that a lot. What would I look like if I was so successful that I had it coming out of my ears? And that's not about money, right? It's about what we feel is success for us and can be defined as anything. And it gets a little scary when I look at it that way. I don't know about you, Daphne. Do you ever feel that way? Like, oh my gosh, and all eyes would be on me, or I would have to perform, or I would have to like show up at my best and like
yeah.
bring real value, right?
Yeah, it's scary, and I think that I can't speak for all women, but I think most women, especially in our profession, right, in the legal profession, whether you're in a corporate law department or a law firm, you have ambition, right? You want to get to a certain place in your career, and that's pervasive across any industry. And when you get there, it's kind of like you have an aha moment or uh-oh moment. I'm here. Now I really have to perform. I have to show up, just like you said, Kathy. But here's the thing: even when you're at the top of your game, it's okay if you make a mistake, right? Because as long as you learn from that mistake and you can be vulnerable and share with your other sisters in law, if you will, or your other, sisters in corporate America, so that they don't inadvertently step in it like you did, then you're making progress, right? I look, I make mistakes all the time. And I'm one of those people who say, "Yep, I blew it. My bad. I should have done this. I should have done that. But let's figure out how to course correct and get back on the right track." And then we keep it moving. You can't beat yourself up when you make those mistakes. And when you step out there, just know that you got this and you are going to figure it out, even no matter how hard it might be.
Uh, so much to say there, so much to unpack, but I'm always reminded of that commercial. I think it was for deodorant. Never let them see you
There
sweat.
you go.
So, that kind of makes it feel like it's not okay to make mistakes. So I think there's this harmony. I never call it balance with my clients. I'm like, balance makes me feel like I'm walking on a tightrope and I might fall off.
Mhm.
And since all my stress, all my research, excuse me, all my formal research is around stress and self confidence, we don't want to amp anybody's stress. But it's a harmony, then I call it, between showing up and fitting the role, even if you're not sure, like fake it till you make it,
Mm,
along with this vulnerability of saying, I could have done that differently. And
yeah.
I still love and accept myself regardless.
Yeah.
And same for you.
Yeah.
The other quote that comes to mind is the funny one that says the beatings will continue until morale improves. You can't expect that. And in corporate America, I found that to be true. And I'm not asking you to throw Microsoft under the bus, but it can't be different anywhere else, right? Because people show up having been raised a certain way. And I call it the personal connection story, which I have my clients write. But that story informs how they show up at work and how tolerant they are of people making mistakes. And I'm always watching that for myself. And I'm guessing you are too. And I want our listeners to do that. That how tolerant are you of people showing up and making mistakes? And they're not going to do it as well as you do. Or maybe
Yeah.
they do it differently and better. It's different, right? And having a perspective and grace around letting people learn and grow on their own
Yeah.
is part of that balance, I think.
And I
Have you
think
found
that
that to be true?
I do. I agree with you 1,000%. And I think that the work that you do, especially with diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, if people can step into that space and be open to all that it brings, then that's where you're going to find the grace, right? That's where you're going to not be so judgmental if one of your colleagues makes a mistake, because perspectives matter. And again, when we're all traveling this journey, this DEIB journey, Kathy, I think that we grow as people. And I think that the tolerance becomes more acceptable, right? And I think that the grace becomes important because we're all in this together, as corny and as trite as that may sound. But at the end of the day, you have to give grace to people who make mistakes, and hopefully they learn from it and move on. Of course, we're not talking about anything that's egregious. But certain things, sometimes people blow things out of proportion for no reason. And again, when I was telling you earlier about wearing your confidence to work every day, again, knowing that you're worth it and knowing that you had it when you walked into the room, making mistakes is just a part of the gig, and it's really on you to rebound in a way that's meaningful.
Amen. Well said. What's next for you, Miss Daphne, before we move to part two?
Yeah, so I'm trying to figure that out. Honestly, I dig it. Being a lawyer at Microsoft, I have the privilege and the pleasure of managing a national team of lawyers and legal professionals, and I love to help them along their career journey. But I have this incredible need, Kathy, a need to make a difference, and I'm not sure that I'm making a difference being a corporate attorney, doing deals for Microsoft. So I'm just really in a position where I'm trying to figure out my why, and I'm not sure that I'm living my why right now. So
Mm.
I don't know. Maybe you can help me figure
Amen.
it out.
Great question. Well, beautiful segue into part two of our podcast. But before we go there, I got to tell you, you sound like me about 10 years ago. I wasn't at Microsoft, but I was in house somewhere else where everybody, like, back then, and I think it's still true for lawyers, it's like going in house means you've arrived. I had been around the block in the legal profession. So it's a journey. It definitely is.
Yeah.
And I really love the fact that you're there because it's exciting, right, in my opinion, to have those conversations with yourself and be open about it and not say, oh, don't say anything because I don't want my employer to know and I don't want them to fire me. That's just silly, right? We should all be having those conversations, and our employers should be proud of us because who wants to have an employee that doesn't want to be there? This is not a job we're working towards, right? We're working towards advancing humanity and living a purpose that helps everyone, which is going to make you happier and more wealthy and prosperous and abundant and optimally healthy. It has to. So part two then of the dialogue, and maybe this is where you're going with this, is bringing to the table something that you would love coaching on, and tell me the issue and let's brainstorm and let me coach you, and the audience gets so much value from this. So hit it,
So,
my friend.
so let me channel my inner Brene Brown and bring some vulnerability to the table, right? Like I said before, I can't remember if we were recording or if we were talking pre-recording, that anything I can do to make sure that another woman, especially another woman, doesn't inadvertently step in it, I'm all for it. But here's the thing for me as I think about what's next. I've been at Microsoft for 14 and a half years, and it's been a great career. I think I've made a difference. um, but I know that there's more to me than being a lawyer, right? Just like we talked about earlier. And I would love um, to get your expertise on something that I think women do all the time. I think it's a sin, and it's where you allow self-doubt to enter into your perspective on what you can do in your career, or if you want to pivot and do something different. What's next, if you will? Self-doubt is a negative. It's something that women should avoid at all costs, because it has you showing up in ways that's not a good look. You talk about brand all the time, and it's not a good look for your brand if you're showing up, in ways that have people questioning whether or not you can bring it like you say you can. So I have had periods in my career where self doubt has wreaked havoc on my life and how I show up, not for a day, but maybe for weeks. right? Which is just not a good look. It's not adding that luster to my brand. I have, in my own mind, Kathy, figured it out, I think. But you're the subject matter expert. So, what say you to someone like me and maybe some women in your audience who sometimes allow self doubt to hold her back?
Yeah, fantastic question. Thanks for being so honest about this. It's a conversation we often have, and I often have it with myself because I'm not immune from this. So, my formal research was around stress and self confidence, and I did this about a decade ago at UCLA because I'm left brain linear analytical, like all the rest of us good women lawyers, and I needed to see this in writing. And I found there's a direct inverse correlation between what you call self doubt, I call self confidence.
Mm,
Really, it all feeds in together, and we could argue on the semantics, but let's not. So, so there's a direct inverse correlation between self-confidence and our stresses. And my research shows that as our stressors go up in our lives, pandemic, families, aging parents, children, you name it, stress goes up and self-confidence drops proportionally. And so when that really happens, that means we're not emotionally resonating with our audience because we're not emotionally resonating with ourselves.
mm,
So our brand value is diminished and we're not coming across well. Whether that means for your audience and for you, Daphne, you're trying to, I know you're married with children, but if you're trying to get a date, it applies. It applies to personal life, to business life. You're just going unnoticed. And this isn't like high school where we're talking about likability, like I didn't get picked for the cheer squad or I didn't get picked for, got picked last for the kickball team in elementary school, but it sometimes harkens back to that, right? So it's really important for you to go back to your personal connection stories, I call it, and others call it origin story, whatever it is. Write that story. I have people write it in my programs and really go through it and see, where did that cycle for you start? And I
mm,
say for you because it's true of all of us. So my version is that I'm an immigrant, a refugee, and I must not be quote unquote good enough.
mm,
Okay. So when
mhm.
I say this on stage or in public settings, I always get some viewer or audience member that writes in and goes, "Oh, you're good enough. Don't feel bad." That's very sweet. But I say this because we all have some version of that that leads
Yeah.
to self doubt. So how does that show up in my life? It shows up when I'm on a call and there's a group of people and I keep trying to interject a comment and they keep talking over me. And then I go into, I must be a refugee. I must not be good enough. And that's why these people hate me. Versus just saying, speak up louder. They're all, boisterous, and just say it again, say it
Mhm.
10 times. So, what is your version of that, Daphne? And that's about self awareness.
Yeah, so that's a great question. I gotta think about it. My version of self doubt is and again, this is being vulnerable. Despite all of the successes that I think I've had in my career, um, I have almost, Kathy, 9 times out of 10 gotten my way. Right? I have decided that I wanted to do X or decided that I was ready to be promoted to Y. And I just set my sights on it and it happened, right? Of course, through hard work, some networking, faith, of course, and maybe some luck. It happened. But then guess what happened to me? There was a goal that I set that didn't happen despite me working hard at it, being very focused at it. And it's
Mm-hmm.
almost like, damn, I failed, right? And somebody who I thought was less deserving got the very same opportunity that I thought was mine, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
where
Mm-hmm.
that corporate politics stuff, that is something that I wish I knew as sooner rather than later in my career, because I just didn't get it. I thought based on merit, you pick the best woman, the best person for the job.
Fairness.
Fairness has nothing to do with it sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was a blow. That was a blow to me. And it took a minute for me to first recognize that, it's not me, right? It's just politics. It just is the circumstances that I find myself in. But how do you rebound from that, right? And so it showed up for me in a way where I was used to succeeding. And then all of a sudden I had this blow. Um, and honestly didn't handle it well. and quite embarrassed about the way that I handled it. I showed up angry. I showed up with a whole lot of self doubt, thinking that I wasn't good enough, that I didn't have the talent, that I wasn't as good as I thought I was, right? And I had this history of being good enough because I always was able to succeed.
So
And
you
so
sort of showed up. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, no, no. So it was one of those situations, right? And just having this conversation with you, I'm feeling like, ugh, Daphne, you
Brings
know
it
better
back
than
up.
that. You know better than that. But look, it took me to have that experience, right? For me to be like, this is not cool. I need to figure this out sooner rather than later, or else I'm going to continue to show up that way. And people are watching. People are watching how you show up. I know it sounds creepy, but there are people who have
No.
control over your career trajectory. And if you don't recognize that you're showing up in a way that's just not that cool, somebody else will. And it will be either a speed bump or a roadblock along your career path, a
You sound like
scenario
you
you
watch
want to
Amazing
avoid.
Race.
Say that again.
You sound like you watch Amazing Race, the show that has speed bumps and
Oh,
roadblocks.
okay. No, I
Back
actually
to
haven't. That's
But back to you,
yeah.
that is such a good example. Thanks for being so honest. Because if any of the listeners here say that has not happened to you, then you're either in deep denial or you're just not present and have no self awareness. But it will keep happening to you, and you'll wonder why you're stumbling until you have this very honest, sweaty conversation with yourself, like Daphne's having. And she's going one step further and having it with all of us, which is so helpful. Thank you so much.
The
Because
lawyer
until
has
we
no
all like,
clothes. The emperor has no clothes. Ah!
I have actually a client that says I walk around naked all the time, like this, right? It's not real, guys. It's not like she's not literally stripped naked, but that feeling. So it really is a function I have found that people are watching, but they're also watching to learn for themselves,
Mhm.
and you can role model. So a new perspective is always helpful in saying, I'm going to role model a different behavior. And I didn't do it exactly that way. And look, as a Gemini, I totally know that from two sides. Sometimes when I respond a certain way, I'm like, holy cow, where'd that anger come from? Or where did that lack of polish come from? Or would I tell one of my clients to behave that way? Of course not. But I catch myself. And
But
then
as
it's
a
the whole,
Gemini, you can always blame it on your evil twin.
right, right, right. I know that doesn't go over very well. People don't buy it. But I always go back now to forgiveness, that it's okay that I did that. And here's the other tool I want you to consider doing. So, one of my values, I have four values: fairness, freedom, faith, and fun. You don't
Mhm.
need four values that start with F, but I work with my clients on their core values. But faith is really not religious. You alluded to it. It's really about the word responsibility, and that responsibility means that you have faith that you have the ability to respond in the moment. And when you keep that faith clear, you strengthen yourself, and your self doubt gets muted and your self confidence hits a peak. This is what I've found. So I have a note literally right here in front of me. It says, I have the ability to respond. I have the resources and I have the answers inside me. And just by looking at that note, sometimes I'm like, I don't even know what that means, but I just show up differently. I
Yeah,
just show up going, I can figure this out.
yeah.
And so having that faith that I intrinsically know it. And I was just talking to a colleague of mine in London, and he said, I don't have faith. My so and so died at a very young age, and my wife died when our children were 5 from cancer. And, tragedies happen in our lives.
Yeah.
My mother just passed in January of a terminal illness. Like, it happens, but those are all exactly the same obstacles you're talking about. Like, I didn't handle myself so well, or so and so passed. And does that lead us jaded forever, or are we going to be a role model to show up stronger than we thought we were, and really then lift other women up that ladder the same way? So focus on, do I, Daphne, have the ability to respond? The answer is always going to be yes,
Sure.
but it's the word responsibility isn't meant to be a burden. It's about you saying, I have the ability to respond. That phrase, and I wish it was mine. I read it somewhere in this woman's blog. I'm like, I never dissected the word responsibility that way. Respond, ability. I have the ability to respond.
Respond. I
So
love that.
write that down
Yeah.
for yourself and know that, so what? You chose a different route than you would choose. Choose again.
Hmm.
It's a choice. It's not a sin. It's a mistake,
Yeah.
right? I don't believe in sins. I believe in errors, and errors are always fixable because mistakes are fixable. And
Yeah.
that, I think, is a sweeter way of looking at life. Does
Yeah.
that help?
Yeah, it's very helpful. I'm glad that you broke it down the way you did because my response, right, my ability to respond, taking responsibility for these feelings that I was having was a little more raw, I think, than what you said, Kathy. I indexed on remembering that I was competent, right? Which I've been saying throughout this podcast. I need women to know how amazing they are. And you just broke it down in the ability to respond. And then I let that negative feeling that I had, I mean, I knew I wasn't responding in the right way and showing up in the right way. I let that mistake, right, fuel me getting back on track. There are a number of experts who've said a setback is a setup for a comeback. And that is
Mhm.
kind of sort of part of the way that I got through um, that specific situation that I was talking to you about. But what you said actually brought it full circle for me. And I appreciate the advice, and I will execute on that every time I have one of these scenarios where I'm feeling like my self confidence isn't where it needs to be.
You're welcome, and
Thank you
please
for that.
do. I think the last thing I'll say on that, and then we'll wrap things up because I know you've got to go, is when you run a business, and one day if you decide to run a business, you will find that that is so true. These setbacks, people say no all the time to you
Yeah.
as a business owner.
Yeah.
And it used to hurt. It was like, I want to help you. Let me help you. I know what I'm talking about. It could help you. And people weren't ready for it or they didn't want it. It wasn't personal. And so your scenario to me is exactly that. It just
Hmm.
feels so freaking personal because it's like, how could it not be personal? They're saying no to me.
Yeah.
It's about them, it's not about you. So your
Hmm.
ability to respond should be about you recognizing that and giving them space and grace to just be. And how I know that is because those same people sometimes come back around 5 years later, like lurkers and voyeurs, like, we've been watching you and now I'm ready. I'm like, you are? Like, where have you been all this time? Reading your blogs,
What
reading
took
your
you so
newsletters,
long? What took you so
right?
long? You should have bet on me five
Everything,
years ago. Yeah.
everything in their divine time and order. Really, I do believe that there's a
Yeah.
divine time and space for everything. It's just we can't see that, and
Yeah.
so we come down hard on ourselves. So that's something else, and that's all faith based, again, not religious,
Hmm.
but just it's got to work out, because in the end, if I don't think it's going to work out, what's my day going to be like, and how am I going to be a contribution when I don't feel good about the possibilities,
Yeah.
right? And when you run a business, that's all you got to go by. Let me tell you, nothing is a slam dunk, and you just got to go by, it's got to work out. So try that on everyone. And if you don't think you're ever going to run a business, to my listeners and for Daphne, people say all the time, oh, I'm a lawyer at a firm or I'm in house. I'm like, you're still running a mini business, let me tell you, because you're a profit center or you're a loss center.
That's right.
And being in house in general, we're a loss center because we're not billing right the way we used to when we were at a firm. At least that was my experience being in house, and still, it's probably true. But you're still a business enterprise onto yourself, and
That's right.
that's how you've got to treat it.
That's correct. Yeah. I
All
agree
right.
with you. I agree.
So, Miss Daphne, any parting words for us before we wrap up with all your brilliance?
No, and let me see. My parting words would be, again, of course, thank you for the opportunity. And look, I hope that your audience will join the movement that is always lifting her up and leaving no woman behind. Again, if we could all wrap our collective arms around those sentiments, wow, could we as a cohort of women do some amazing things and start, working to close that gap that is the equity gap between our male counterparts and ourselves.
Amen. Well said. I don't have any words to add to that. The eloquence of it was so real, and it impacts everyone. This is not just about women, but it impacts anybody, however way, whatever pronoun you want to use. It's a humanity issue, but since we're women, we can only start with ourselves, right? And other
Yeah.
women, because we identify and we can support them, and we've been there.
And we're
So thank
behind.
you.
We're behind, Kathy. So let's get caught up. That's one of
That's
the reasons
definitely
why I'm
true, because
focused.
when
Yeah,
we're behind, society is
that's
behind, and
correct.
that's the real. It's not just about me and you, Daphne, wanting it for ourselves and our ego and our greed. It's because we know when the boardroom is filled with women, or equal women and men, for instance, and the
Yeah.
studies have come out, the revenues go up, the organization prospers,
And it's the
stock
right
prices go
thing.
up.
It's the right thing to do. Forget about the whole value prop, right? Of bringing a diverse cohort to the table in business. It's just the right thing to do because what I know is when women focus, everybody wins. Hashtag proud to be
Absolutely.
us, right? So,
There you go.
um,
We'll end on that beautiful note. When women prosper, when women focus, everyone wins.
that's right.
Thank you for being with us. If
Thank
you have
you.
anything else that you want us to note, I'm happy to drop it in the show notes. If anybody wants to get in touch with you, is that possible? Or
Yes, my
maybe through
LinkedIn.
mail?
I thought that you got me worried about my LinkedIn, but I'm on LinkedIn. I'm Daphne Forbes. And look, I'm no problem reaching out to me directly. My email address is dforbes@microsoft.com. And my personal email is Daphne DAPHNESQ@outlook.com. Please reach out if there's anything I can do to help or share my story to help you along your career path. I'm all about it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Daphne. And to
Thank you.
all of my listeners, this wraps up another episode of KTG podcast series, Women Lawyers Making a Difference. Go out there, make a difference. Remember, your value and your worth is inherent. You were born with it, you're born deserving. And take that and do with it whatever you want, because you have the freedom to be a fantastic woman, mother, however you define your role, and a beautiful lawyer. And until next time, we are done.